Hey, everybody, welcome back to Reason and Theology. Your host, Michael. We're continuing our Basics of Biblical Hebrew series on Lecture 21, joined by Louis Dizon. Louis, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I am doing great. It's been a little bit hectic as
Yeah.
usual, but managing.
Sure.
Always, glad to make time to prepare for these. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, it's always
and,
good to have you. And Mhm.
yeah, happy with the progress we've been making. I
Yeah.
think at this point we're well into the series.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what do
So
you have in store for us today for Lecture 21?
we're continuing the discussion of like weak verbs as well as
Hmm.
continuing our translation of the book of Ruth as well as
Hmm.
bits of Genesis.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm like going forward, I'm trying to focus less on grammar lessons and more on actual translation, but
Okay.
there will still be like discussions of grammar.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to share your screen, I'll add it on my end. We'll get started here.
All right,
There we go.
excellent. So as usual, what I'd like to do is start off by working through bits of the book of Genesis um, to see, last we did this, we read the seventh day, which is the first three verses of Genesis 2. And we can continue by reading through Genesis 2, verses 4 through 17. This is the part that describes the garden. Uh, so let's begin. And I'm using an interlinear that gives like translations of some of the less common words. So you see that there are some translated into English. I set it to show information for words occurring. Let's make it 25 times or less to make it a little bit more challenging. All right, verse 4. Ele toldot hashamayim ve'aretz behibaram bayom asit Adonai Elohim eretz ve'shamayim. So these are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created, or literally in their being created, in the day that the Lord God made earth and heavens. So it's fairly straightforward. Bahibar am is interesting because it's an infinitive construct of bara. Remember Genesis 1:1, it says, Bereshit bara Elohim. Now we see bara being used as an Nifal infinitive construct. So Behibar and then the at the end is the third person plural um, suffix, pronominal suffix, and then asot Adonai, bayom asot Adonai. So this is the Lord's making of earth and heavens. So asot is an infinitive construct of asa, to make or to do. Notice that the text uses two different verbs, bara and asa. So bara is typically translated to create, asa is typically translated to make or to do. They have slightly differing shades of meaning. Create, bara has more of that connotation of creating something out of nothing, where asa has more of that connotation of molding something that's already there. But other than that slight difference in emphasis, they are largely synonymous. They are what you would call imperfectly synonymous verbs. Verse 5. V'chol siach hasadeh terem yihyeh va'aretz v'chol esev hasadeh terem yitzmach ki lo uh, himtir Adonai Elohim al haaretz ve'adam ein la'avod et ha'adamah. And every bush of the field before there was in the earth, before there was any bush of the field in the earth, and every green plant in the field um, before it had basically sprouted, for the Lord God had not yet caused to rain upon the earth, and there was no man to work the ground. Notice the first hint of that famous pun in Hebrew, Ve'adam en la'avod et ha'adama. So Adam comes from Adama. Adam, of course, means man. It becomes the proper name of the first man, Adam. And Adama, of course, means earth or ground, but it has that connotation of like red earth. So it's implied that the first man, Adam, had sort of a ruddy um, face. So you've got Yitz, Yitzmach, which is the imperfect kal, third person masculine singular of tzamach, to sprout or to grow. And then himtir is a hefil, perfect third masculine singular of matar, which is to rain. So remember, he feels the causative, so himtir means to cause to rain. He caused to rain. Verse 6, Va'ed ya'ale min haaretz vehishke- vehishka et kol pnei ha'adama. And there was a stream that went up, that went out from the earth, and it watered all of the face of the land. So Ya'ale is the third, so it's the Kal imperfect third masculine singular of Allah, to go up. And then Hishke is I believe it's an Hefil. Yep, that's a Hefil. It is a Hefil perfect, third masculine singular. Actually, no, it's a Vakatal, not a perfect. Um, so there's that stream that is mentioned, which branches off into the four rivers. We'll see later. Verse 7, here is one of the more pregnant theological passages in our reading. Vayitzer Adonai Elohim et ha'adam afar min ha'adama vayipach be'apav nishmat chaim vayhi adam lenefesh chaya. And the Lord God formed the man out of dust from the ground, and he blew upon his face the breath of life, and the man became a living soul or a living creature. Um, there's a lot to unpack here. So there's a bunch of Vaiktols in the Kal third masculine singular. We got Vaitzer to form, Vaipak to blow, Vaihi to be. Um, and then I want you to note the use of Nefesh Chaya. That's a fairly common phrase in Hebrew. The literal translation would be a living soul, but you can translate it as a living being or a living creature. But the idea here in the Hebraic mindset is that the nefesh chaya is the combination of the physical body and the nishmat chayim, the breath of life that is placed upon the aforementioned body. So the two of those things put together forms the nefesh chaya. Verse 8, Vaita Adonai Elohim gan be'eden mikedem vayasem sham et ha'adam asher yatzar. So God and the Lord God planted a garden, the Garden of Eden in Eden, in the east, and he placed there the man which he had formed. So Vaita is a Kal Vaiktol form of Nata. So this is an example of a first nun verb. That means the original root had a nun in it, but the nun dropped out, and which is why you only see the tet and the ayin here. We will be learning about first nun verbs later on down the road, but for now, the only thing you need to know is that this is a weak verb and one of the radicals is missing. And then vayasem is interesting because this is from seam, is a kal vaiktol third masculine singular. So it's a seam, but the second root, the yod in the middle, drops out. This is an example of a second yod verb, and we're gonna discuss that a lesson later. We're not discussing it this lesson, but we'll discuss it in the next lesson. So again, for now, only thing you need to know is that that is also a weak verb. So one of the consonants that makes up the root is not there. And then verse 9. Vayatz Vayatzmach Adonai Elohim min ha'adama kol etz nechmad lemar'eh v'tov lema'achal va'etz hachayim b'toch hagan v'etz hada'at tov vera. And the Lord God planted from the ground caused to grow from the ground every tree that is desirable in appearance and good to eat, and the tree of life in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So the vectorial form of tamach is here. The mar'eh is a, you might notice the word ra'ah, which is to see. So this comes from that. It's a noun form, the same thing. Ma'achal, from achal. You may notice the mem here. So sometimes you can take a verb and add a mem with the patach at the beginning. It turns into a noun. It looks very similar to a participle, but it is not parsed as one. As you can see here, it is considered a noun, like an actual legit noun. Verse 10. V'nahar yotze me'eden lahashkot et hagan umisham yipared v'haya arba'a roshim. And a river went out from Eden to water the garden, and from there it went down. It it has four heads. It was four heads. So the river goes out of Eden. It becomes four tributaries, which will be mentioned shortly. But first, yotze is a participle form of yatzat, to go out. Called participle masculine singular. Lahashkot is I believe it's a hofal. Nope, it's a hefil. It's an infinitive construct form of shaka, which means to water. And you may notice that the third root drops out, is replaced with ot here. Again, that's a third guttural, another type of weak verb. There's a lot of weak verbs you might notice. We just ran through three. But it's good because then you get a good idea of what a weak verb looks like out in the wild instead of just in a grammar textbook. Verse 11. Shem ha'echad pishon hu ha'sovev et kol eretz ha'chavila asher sham hazahav. So the name of one is Pishon. It is surrounding all the land of Havilah, which is there. Gold, which there is gold there. So there's a bit of question about where exactly Havilah is. I've seen various um, like opinions about the exact location of Havilah. It could be Ethiopia, it could be India. No one's sure. Actually, there's an interesting video by Inspiring Philosophy talking about the fact that the four rivers probably converge in a part of the Persian Gulf, which is now underwater, but at the time it would have been above the land. I'm just mentioning it in passing. We don't need to go into detail, but if anyone's interested in the geography of Eden, I highly recommend that particular Inspiring Philosophy video. But back to the grammar, the only verb to highlight here is sovev, which is a kal participle of savav, to surround, in masculine singular. And in verse 12, uzahav haaretz hahu tov sham habdolach ve'even hashoham. And gold in the land was good, in that land was good there, and there was bdellium gum, whatever that is, and stone of onyx. And then verse 13. Veshem hanahar hasheni gichon hu hasoveb et kol eretz kush. And the name of the second river was Gihon, and it is surrounding the land of Cush. And then verse 14, Vashem hanahar shlishi chidekel hu haholech kidmat Ashur vehanahar haravi'i hu Frat. So you've got the Tigris and Euphrates mentioned here. And the name of the third river, Tigris, it is going to the east of Ashur or Assyria. And the fourth river is the Euphrates or Frat. Three more verses of Genesis, and then we'll go to the textbook next. Verse 15. Vaikach Adonai Elohim et ha'adam vayanichehu began Eden la'avda u l'shomra. And the Lord God took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to work and to work it and to guard it. So Vaikach is the Vaito third masculine singular of Lakach. The Lamed drops out. Yinachehu comes from from Noach. So it's a he feel Vaito form, third masculine singular. Ovda, Ulashomra, both of these are infinitive constructs of Avad and Shamar, respectively. Verse 16. Vaitzav Adonai Elohim al ha'adam lemor mikol etz hagan achol ochel. And the Lord God commanded upon the man, saying, From every tree of the knowledge, from every tree of the garden you may surely eat. Eating you may eat literally. You see achol tochel. So you got an call infinitive absolute joined to a call second masculine singular imperfect for emphasis. Vaitzav is from tzava. The hey drops out, so this is also a weak verb. We have a lot of weak verbs here. Lemor, of course, you know what that is. Verse 17. Umeetz hada'ato vera lo tochal mimenu ki beyom acholcha mimenu mot tamut. And from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you may not eat from it, for in the day you eat of it you will surely die. So another double verb, mot tamut, from mut. Dying, you will die, in the way, if you want to translate literally. Okay, so we're done with that. We will continue with Genesis 2:18 next time. Let's switch gears to discussing first Vav Yod verbs. Now, remember last time we talked about third Vav Yod verb, which is the type of verb where the third root is a Vav or a Yod. Now we're talking first Vav Yod verbs, and here the first root is either a Vav or a Yod. Now, one of the things that happens in Hebrew is that the Vav will usually, in the historic form, it would be a Vav, but it turns into a Yod in Hebrew. And the way we know that it is historically a Vav is that its cognates in other languages, such as Aramaic or Arabic, will retain the Vav or the Waw, as it is called. Trying to think of a good example. Yeah, it'll come to me later. The main thing you need to know is that Hebrew does not like having verbs whose first root is a Vav and tend to turn them into Yods. So, what is historically Washav or Vashav turns into Yashav. And if you look it up in the lexicon, you will find it under the letter Yod. For purposes of these lessons, you do not need to know about. You don't need to know whether any particular verb is a historic Vav or not. So first, I want to go quickly to the summary section, so you get an idea of what we're going to cover quickly. So the first vaviod verb, when it is vowelless, it will either coalesce or it will drop. It will drop in the kal and will coalesce everywhere else. It will always be listed under the letter yod. When you look it up in the lexicon, you will not find it under vav. Vowelless first vav yod will form the following patterns when they coalesce. So this is always assuming that it has a shva underneath. So av or av becomes o, I becomes e, I can also become a, then e becomes e, and then u becomes u with a colon with a short vav. So here are the exceptions. In the first kal, it first vav kal drops. In the imperfect, you have the preformative lengthening. So yeshev is the example there from yeshav. Imperfects are basically the same thing, but you drop the yod tere, so it becomes shev. And then infinitives add the tav, and then they act like segolates. You may remember the segolates, words like eved or sefer. So um, infinitives with first vav yod will become segolates. So shevet is an example. And then remember the underlying preformative vowels. So in the Nifal A class, you have it will be typically begin with a no. So no shav, for example. Hifil, it will have he, so heshiv. And then hofal, we will start with a hu, so it's hu shav. So we will return to the summary section a little bit later. Now, basic principles. Um, so the so vav and yod has a tendency to drop or coalesce when it is vowelless. So you may remember that in some forms it has no vowel, and the way you know that is that it has a shva underneath. When it does have a vowel, it remains uh, in the text. So yatav, because the yod has a patach, it stays. Um, Now, when it does not have a vowel, this is where we start seeing changes. So, example given here in the kal imperfect of yatav is yitav. So normally it would have a shva underneath, but the shva disappears. So, and what that means is that that yod just becomes part of the long vowel now. It loses its consonantness, if that's a word. So it becomes an extension of the hirik that's right before it, in a way. So again, here are the five ways that um, coalescing can happen. In every single case, the vav or the yod becomes an extension of the vowel that comes right before it. So o, a, e, u, and in every case, it would be counted as a long vowel. So you don't have to worry too much about memorization. The main thing you have to memorize is this, this right here. Um, Memorize the five ways, the five patterns of coalescing that could possibly take place. And as long as you know that, then you should be able to identify first first vav yods fairly easily. So as mentioned, the first vav will drop in the kal form. So um, let me see if they give us a good example of that. Ah, yes, teshev is a good example of that. So remember that teshev, historically, it was a vishav before the vav became a yod. So it will turn back into a vav uh, when it is parsed in the imperfect. So the expected form is tiv shev or tiu shev. But as we have learned in the past, the Hirik and the Vav do not go together. The way you remember it is it makes the EU sound, and Hebrew doesn't like the EU sound. It says EU to that. So what happens? The Vav drops out, becomes Tishev here. But remember that all the way back when we were discussing vowel changes, that the penultimate syllable in a verb likes to lengthen. So instead of tishev, you got teshev. So what started off as tivshev becomes a tishev becomes a teshev. So when you see teshev, keep in mind there is likely a yo, a vav that became a yo, a yod that came from a vav that dropped out at some point here. Conjunctives, fairly self-explanatory. They are identical to the imperfect. No need to dwell on that. The imperative comes from the imperfect. You drop off the first radical of the third masculine singular form. So instead of yeshev, you got shev. And then all the other forms come from that. You got shvi, shvu, shevna. Notice that in these two cases, the tere is replaced by a shva. So shev, shvi, shvu, shevna. Shev, shvi, shvu, shevna. So if you're going to memorize another table, memorize this one. Infinitive construct. This one, it might start to throw you into a loop because you may, for yashav, you get shevet. And like, where did that tav come from? So this is something that the infinitive occasionally does. Um, it likes to add a final tav to some of when there's a weak verb. So lashevet. So shevet um, is one example of it. One and it occurs with the other forms of weak verbs as well. One of my favorite examples is tet. It's actually from Natan, but the noon, both the first noon and the third noon dropped out, and then a tav is added to it. It will really throw you in for a loop the first time you run into it. But I'm telling you now that that's a thing that happens. Um, so a simple tav. Why do I keep saying tet? It's not a tet, it's a tav. A simple tav is frequently added to infinitive constructs that have lost a root letter, and then it acts like a segolate. So the expected form, which would be shived, becomes shevet. So leshevet is to dwell. You may run into it. So here are the two phases of how it changes. Um, don't worry too much about that. Now, the first vav yod will usually coalesce with the preformative. So, Kal verbs that originally began with vav are the only first vav yod verbs that drop the historic consonant, as we have seen. All remaining forms that will be discussed follow the predominant first vav yod pattern, which is that vowelless vav yod coalesces with preformatives, as we've seen earlier. So we will run really quickly through some of these paradigms. So first, the nifal. So first vav yod nifal verbs use vav throughout the entire paradigm. So it doesn't matter if it was historically a vav or a yod; it will always be a vav in the nifal. The form that you might expect would be yav shev, yavashev here, and but it will change as we see. So in the perfect form, you might expect nav shav, but because of coalescing, it becomes no shav. So that's the fifth type of coalescing that you can expect to happen. I'm just gonna scroll back up, but decided not to. Oh, lost my place. But there we go again. So nav shav, it becomes no shav In the imperfect, it becomes Yivashev. Yeah. So actually, let's go through how it changes. Um, so you have, yeah. So normally, yeah, this is actually, yeah, it's interesting. So in Yivashev, it's actually acts like a strong form because of the presence of the patach there. So there's no coalescing happening here, but does happen here in the perfect form. The pual, the PL pual and the hit pael. Generally, the first vav yod always has a vowel, so you will not see weak forms. Hefil is an interesting one because this one confused me a lot. Because the in some forms you have a vav coalescing with a patach before it becomes an o. So havshiv becomes hoshiv. But we typically associate verbs that start with ho with the ho file. So there have been more than a few cases where I saw a he feel weak verb and I mistook it for a ho file. But do not make that mistake. This is not a ho file, it is a he feel. It's easier to identify in the case of yatav because the he feel form is hetiv. In this case, because it's a yod, it coalesces into a tsere. From haitiv becomes hetiv. In both cases, it's possible for the yod or the vav to drop out, leading to what is known as a defective spelling, which means basically it's spelled like this. So, and then the hofal. Um, so this is the one where you get the form hushav. So notice that the coalescing has a historic U class, usually a kibbutz like this, and becomes ishurek vav. So yush, and then the imperfect form is yushav. So hushav, yushav, and then you've got some exceptions mentioned here. So you've got assimilated forms. Um, a few first vav yods will assimilate the vav yod into the following consonant, just like the vowelless nun. So the example given will is yitzak. So you might notice that in its final form, yitzok, sorry, yitzok, not yitzak, yitzok, you might notice there's only one yod there. Where did the other yod go? It got swallowed up, or it got assimilated into the tzadeh. And you know that it got assimilated because the tzadeh now has a dagesh on it. That very rarely happens, just so you know. In most other cases, it simply coalesces. Now, couple of irregular forms. You've got halach and yahal. Halach is an interesting case because the third root is typically either halach or yalach, but which comes from valach. Um, but the yod turns into a hey, so it just becomes halach in all the basic forms, and you'll only find halach in your lexicon. Um, but some forms of it give away the fact that there was a historic form with the yod there, and the main example of that is the imperfect third masculine singular yelech. Here it's acting like there was a yod there at one point, and in fact there was. Because you have yivlech, which becomes yilech, which becomes yelech. So, yeah. And then yachal has an irregular form as well, which is yuchal in the imperfect form. Now, the first time you run into it, looks like a pual, but make no mistake, this is not a pual, it is a kal. Actually, there's an interesting blurb here about how some scholars think that it was originally a hofal that lost its causative meaning. Um, those who are nerds when it comes to historical linguistics can study that on their own time. The only thing you need to know is that for our purposes, we are treating it as a simple call. So we're back to the summary page. So what did we learn? We learned that with the first vav yod, if it has a vowel underneath, then it functions just like a regular strong noun. Strong noun. Strong verb. Why did I say strong noun? There is no such a thing as a strong noun. Um, but if it is vowelless, like if it has a shva, it will generally coalesce, or in the case of a first vav in the kal, it drops. And again, five ways it can coalesce. You've got your exceptions, and you've got the underlying preformative vowels. So there's a nice little section here on what questions should you ask when you read. Fortunately, first vowels, as it mentions, are fairly easy to um, recognize. Typically, if you see two letters, a two-letter root, you can, in most cases, guess that there was probably a yod or a vav in the beginning that has dropped out. Sorry, that has yeah, it has coalesced. Yeah, actually, in most cases, you can just see the yod and the vavs. The yod's still there. Uh, it's only a little tricky if the vav does drop out in the kal form. So when you see a form like teshev, you know not to look for tashav in the lexicon, because the way it's parsed is definitely not the parsing of a perfect form. It's an imperfect. It's parsed like an imperfect. You've got the preformative tav. Why do I keep calling it a tet today? Preformative tav with a tere, and then two roots, and then you can ask yourself, where did the other one go? Probably it got dropped out. Now, and then you now have to consider in the infinitive construct, if you see a tav at the end, if it's in a segolate form like this, that means probably the tav there is not part of the root either. And if you have the textbook, you've got representative forms. Really, the parts that you need to memorize are the ones in red because all the other forms are derived from that. Take a good long look at this. So this is the table that you ought to become familiar with. And then you have a nice little chart of all the different forms. Um, so yeah, so you don't want to memorize all those different forms. That would be way too tedious, and no grammar teacher expects you to memorize those forms. Just need to memorize the basic rules that we discussed in the summary and are expressed in the red parts of this particular table. And then we're gonna take up second vav yod verbs next time, which is what happens when the vav or the yod is in the middle. So you see vo, sim, and kum as examples of that. Now, let's go to the book of Ruth. You may remember that we were covering the book of Ruth um, past couple of sessions. We did the first two chapters of Ruth. Now we'll do Ruth chapter 3, which will be a little bit shorter than the previous chapter. It's only 17 verses, and we can get right into it. This is where Ruth makes her move on Boaz. Verse 1. Vatomer la Naomi chamota biti halo avakesh lach manoach asher yitav lach. So for and Naomi said her mother-in-law said to her, "My daughter, um, did you not seek? Did I not seek you, resting, which was good to you?" Okay, this is a little funky. Um, yeah. So you see that there are a few verbs here. We're not going to bother with Vatomer because it's already a form you should be familiar with right now, by now. Um, did I not seek for you a resting place which is good to you? So avakesh is a imperfect first common singular of bakash in the. Let me see. This one's actually a little tricky. How would you parse that? That looks like a PL. I'm going to cheat and take a look over here. Um, yep, that is a PL. The dagesh on the kof is the mark of the PL. So I will seek, and then yitav. We discussed this. This is from yatav. Notice what we just talked about. The yod is vowelless because it has been it has coalesced into the hirek yet right before it. So it will be good. Which will be good to you? Yatav, of course, to be good. Third masculine singular imperfect. Verse 2. Ve'ata halo vo'az madoatanu mad modatanu asher hait et naarotav hinehu zore et goren hashorim halayla. And now, is not Boaz our relative, with who was which was the his young men, which was with his young men, I guess. And behold, he is Zore. He is um, doing something with seeds because Zera seeds. Um, Doing something with seeds in the threshing floor. Oh, okay. So he's like separating the seed, the grain from the chaff of the wheat tonight at the threshing floor, or something along those lines. Zore, of course, is a participle form of zara um, in the kal participle masculine singular. So Boaz is doing his night shift at the threshing floor. And that's where Ruth is going to make her move. Verse 3. Verachatzt vasacht vasamt simlotaich alaich vayaradti hagoren al tivad tivad'i laish ad kaloto le'echol ve'lishtot. So, and you will wash So you will wash and you will suct and you will anoint yourself and you will put on your garment upon you, and uh, I will go I will go down the threshing floor. Do not uh, do not recognize to a man until you finish eating and drinking. Do not come to know any man. Yeah, that's It's a little tricky to translate this particular part, but you can see here a series of three verbs, all in the Vaik total form. Second, feminine singular. Rachatz is to wash. Sach, sachach is to anoint. Sorry, what's the? There is a there's a root that dropped out there, but I'm not sure what root. Sukh. So this is the second vav form. So there's a vav that dropped out, and then sim, basant. There are two. These you have two second yod vav forms in quick succession right here. Suk and sim, and then yarad, of course, is to go down. Vayaranti. I will go down um, in the Vaiktol form, and then Tivade, Tivadi from Yada. Yada is the first Vav form, as you can see. Um, do not be recognized, actually. This looks like a Nifal form. Um, do not be recognized by a man until you finish eating and drinking. Le'echol or lishtot, both are kal infinitive constructs from achal and shata, to eat and to drink respectively. Echol is a strong form, it's pretty straightforward. Lishtot is interesting because it comes from shata, but the hay drops out and is replaced with ot. Verse 4, Vayhi b'shav b'shachvo vayadat et hamakom asher yishkav sham uvat uh, vagilit margalotav vashachavti hu yagid lach et asher ta'asin. Yeah. Actually, I just realized I've been misparsing these. These are not first persons. These are second person feminines. I forgot that sometimes the when you see a, a shva and a yod at the end, that's a second feminine singular in the Vaiktol form. Sorry, so it's actually backtracking here. This is um, and you will go down to the threshing floor, and you will not be recognized by a man until, yeah. All right. So verse 4 translation, and it will be in shachvo, in his lying down, when he lies down, and you will recognize the place which he lies down there, and you will go and you will uncover his feet, and you will lie down, and he will speak to you what you will do. And he'll speak to you what you will do. Yep. So let's parse some of these. Yadat from Yada. That's is the Vaiktol, second feminine singular. And then Yishkav is from Shahav in the imperfect, Kal imperfect, third masculine singular. Uvat is the from Vo. So Vav drops out, Te gets added in. Vaik Tol Kal, second feminine singular. Vagilit is from Gala. So um, the Yod coalesces into the Hirek here. Um, second feminine singular from Gala. And notice that we're putting all that knowledge of weak verbs to use right away because there are a lot of them in this text. Shahavti from Shahav, Vaiktol, second feminine singular again. Yagid is from uh, Hagad, actually Higid, which is a he feel form, third masculine singular. Ta'asin is from Asa, and that is a Kal imperfect second feminine singular. So, all right, verse 5. V'tomer elea kol asher tomri ese. And she said, and she said to her all which he said, I will do. So, that's interesting. So, V'tomer elea tomri. So, that is, this is inclusion of vowels even where there are no consonants. Shows that there's a reading tradition that the word eli, where the standardized consonantal text did not. Interesting. But Tomri is from Amar. Ese is from Asa. This is second feminine singular imperfect. This is first common singular imperfect. Verse 6. Vatered Hagoren Vatas Kachol Asher Tivata Hamota. And she went down the threshing floor, and she did just as all which her mother-in-law commanded her. Vatered is the victual form of Yarad. Once again, the first, it's a first yod verb. The yod has been assimilated here. It has dropped out. I'm not going to point these out going forward. I'm just going to say it in passing and assume that you know that a weak verb is in play. I'm just going to say the root in passing, I mean. Batas comes from asa. It's a vaiktol. Kal vaiktol, second, um, sorry, not second masculine singular, third feminine singular. Remember, second masculine singular and third feminine singular can be identical sometimes. You know the difference from context. Tivata. Um, so that is the from tsava in the kal third feminine singular. Perfect. And then verse 7, Vayochal Boaz Vayesh Vayesht Vaitav Libo Vayavo Lishkav Bikte Ha'arema Vatavo Valat Ve Vatral Marglotav Vatishkav. And Boaz was eating, and he lay down, and his heart was good, and he was having a good time. And he went to lie down in the midst of the heap of grain. Um, and she went in the secrecy and uncovered his feet, and she lay there. They're added for translation emphasis. I will mention in passing that some scholars have suggested that margalot, feet, is a euphemism for something else. I will neither confirm nor deny that that is the case. I will simply take the text at its face value. So, vayochal, he was eating. Um, that is the vaiktol. Kal, third masculine singular, fakal. Vayesht is from shata, vaiktol, kal vaiktol, third masculine singular. Vaitav is um, yatav. It's a kal vaiktol, third masculine singular. Vayavo, same thing, from bo. Lishkav is infinitive construct form of shachav. Vatavo is the vaiktol, kal vaiktol, third feminine singular of vo. So you notice we're now getting feminine, third feminine singulars, because these are all things Ruth is doing now. Vatral is the same thing for gala, and Vatishkav is the same thing for shachav. Verse 8. Vayhi b'chatzi halayla vayecherad ha'ish vayelafed vehine isha shochevet margalotav. And so it was in the middle of the night, and the man woke up, and vayelafed, hold on, what is yilafed? He turned to find, he turned around, and behold, a woman was lying at his feet. So, Vayecherad from Harad, Kal Vaiktol Harad too. um, to wake up. And Yilaped, um, that is a looks like a PL. Let me confirm. No, it's a Nifal. Is a Nifal. He turned around. Vaiktol. Lafet. What's the root of that anyway? Lafat. So the Tav is indeed part of the root. So he turned around. Lafet. Third masculine singular. Shochevet is the Kal participle feminine singular of Shachav. Verse 9. Vayomer mi'at vatomer anochirut amatecha farashta knafecha al amatcha ki goel ata. And he said, "Who are you?" And she said, "I am Ruth, your maidservant." And farashta, and you took under you took your wings upon your servants, or you spread out your wings upon your servant. Metaphor, of course, for taking care of. For you are the Goel, the Redeemer. So, Redeemer, of course, a very important term in Hebrew Bible. It is pregnant with theological connotation because, of course, who is the Goel in the New Testament if not our Lord Jesus Christ? But we're not here to talk about typology, we're here to talk grammar. So, Vayomer and Vatomer, self explanatory. Farashta, from Farash. This is the Ve. This is like just a simple um, Kal, perfect, second masculine singular. So this is not a Vaiktol, even if it looks like one. Goel, of course, from Gaal, to redeem. It's a participial form, but it's an actual legit noun here. Verse 10, Vayomer, Barucha at la'Adonai biti hetavt hasdech ha'acharon min harishon uh, levilti lechet achare habachorim im dal va'im ashir. And he said, "Blessed are you to the Lord, my daughter. Um, you have done good. Um, the your loving kindness or your mercy uh, to the other from the beginning, the last from the beginning, to not go to another of the young men, if weak and if not either weak nor strong, Dollar Ashir. So Boaz saying, bless her, you didn't go to any of the younger guys there. Levilti, of course, is a way of negating a infinitive. So lechet is from halach. So you've got an interesting case here. Um, okay, so the hedra, you know. So it's from halach, infinitive construct. Yeah. And then verse 11, Ve'ata biti al tir'i kol asher tomri ese lach ki yodea kol sha'ar ami ki eshet chayil at ve'ata ki amnam ki am goel anochi ve'gam yesh goel karov mimeni. And now, my daughter, do not be afraid. All that you have said I will do to you, for oops, didn't you do that? For um for I know all of the rest of my people, for a woman of strength. you are. And now for truly, if there is no if there is no other redeemer, uh, Vigam, I also there is a redeemer closer than me. So he's saying that there's another guy who could possibly act as the redeemer, and he has priority over Boaz. So we first need to establish whether this other dude is willing to do his duty. If not, Boaz will do it. I just realized we did two verses. Ki amnam ki am goel anochi vegam yesh goel karov mimeni. So let's see. Al tir'i. So al of course negates adjussive second adjussive because there are no negative imperatives in Hebrew. This is from yira to fear. This is in the it is the adjussive, caljussive second feminine singular. Tomri is from Amar. Amar, it is a cal imperfect second feminine singular. Ese is from Asa. It is a cal imperfect first common singular. Yodea is a um, from Yada. It is a cal participle masculine singular. Um, and that's all of it. Verse 13. We've got 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 5 verses to go. Lini halayla v'haya v'voker im yig'alech tov yig'al ve'im lo yachpotz v'ga'alech v'ga'altich anochi chai Adonai shichvi ad haboker. So stay with me tonight, and it'll be morning when yigalech, um, and something will be good. Yigal, he will reveal, and if he, oh sorry, it's not to reveal, it's to redeem. And if he will redeem good, um, good, he will redeem. But if not, yachpot, um, I will something. What's chafatz? Um, yeah, I will chafatz. I will sort of show kindness, and I will redeem you. Uh, and I something to redeem, and I'll show kindness to redeem you, and I will redeem you. I, as the Lord lives. Um, it's lay, um, like sort of stay with me until the morning. Just occurred to me this is not very ethically acceptable, sleeping together like that before marriage, but be that as it may. Um, Yigalech, so from Gala, um, it is a, I believe that is a PL, um, and from Gala, and so third masculine singular, PL imperfect. Um, Ditto to this. So different. So here in this case, you have the pronominal suffix ech. Um, Yachfot is from chafatz, kal third masculine singular, and then you have more instances of gaal. Here it is in the infinitive construct. Here it is um, in the kal imperfect first common singular. Shichvi is an imperative feminine singular. Um, all right, verse 14. Vatishkav margalotav ad haboker, vatakom baterem yakir איש את רעהו ויאמר אל יוודע כי באה ואישה הגורן ויום. Okay, sorry, that's verse 15. And she lay at his feet until the morning, and then she got up before a man could recognize one another, and he said, um, do, do not know, for she came the man to the threshing floor. So Vatishkav is the Vaiktol of Shachav, third feminine singular. Vatakom is from Kum, Kal, and the Kal Vaiktol, third feminine singular. Um, Yakir is he feel imperfect from he here. Wait, I think it's he here. Yeah, sorry, it's Nahar. So it's a noon that drops out of this. Um, he feel Nakir in the he feel imperfect third masculine singular. Um, Yuvada is from Yada. Um, in the Jasiv, and trying to parse this one. I'm not sure what stem this is, but it's definitely third masculine singular. Nifal, that is the Nifal form of Yada. All right, three more verses, then we're done. Verse 15. Vayomer Havi Hamit Pachat Asher Alaich Alaich Ve'ech Ve'echaziva Vatochez Ba Vayamad Vayamod Shesh Orim Vayashet Alea Vayavo Ha'ir. Um, and he said, Havi, so Hamit Pachat. Okay. Um, sort of like stretch out your cloak. Yeah. Which is upon you, and I and I and take in it, uh, take in it, and she took in it, and Yamad from Madad, and he measured 6 measures of grain, and he placed upon her, and he went to the city. So he gave her some food for the trip home. Havi is feminine imperative form of Yahav, which is to give. Actually, it's sort of give your cloak, not stretch out your cloak. Um, the way I remember Yahav is if you have it, you gotta give it. So, Havi. Achaz is, of course, to take. So, this is the. Um, and is from the. And this is the. Goodness. Vaiktol form. Third feminine singular. No, that's not a Vaiktol form. That is a Kal imperative feminine singular. V'echazi va. So he's telling her, and take in it. And then this is the Vaiktol form. Vatochez. She took. Vayamad is the Vaiktol of Madad, to measure. Vayaset is the Vaiktol form of Sim. Vayavo, Vaiktol of Vo. And then verse 16. Vatavo el chamota vatomer miat biti vatagedla et kol asher asa la ha'ish. I just want you to notice something really interesting. So notice that these are both Kal Vaiktol forms of Vo, but in one case, the Cholem Vav disappears, All that's left is the Cholem, which is now placed on top of the Aleph. And here, the um, Cholem Vav is there. So this is what you would call defective spelling. It can be spelled both ways, with the Vav and without the Vav. Um, moving on. So, and she went to her mother-in-law and she said, "Who are you, my daughter?" Um, and she recounted to her all which the man did for her. Let me see. Are there any forms to parse? Vataged is um, the Viketol form. I believe that's a he feel. He feel Viketol, third feminine singular in the Jussive. Sorry, not Jussive. Why I say Jussive? It's not Jussive. Um, yeah, it does not look like a he feel because the yod between the second and third roots that normally indicate a he feel has shortened. And then basic form of asa here. All right. Oh, sorry, it's 18 verses long. Why did I think it was 17? Whatever. It's not that long. We'll treat it as one verse. Verses 17 and 18. Vatomer, shesh shorim ha'ele natan li ki amar al tavoi rekam el chamotech vatomer shvi biti ad asher ted'in en yapol davar ki lo yishkot ha'ish ki im kila hadavar hayom. And she said, "Six measures of these are 6 measures of wheat he gave me, for he said, 'Do not go empty-handed to your mother-in-law.'" And she said, um, "Shvibiti, until you know how Shvi. Let me see. What is Shvi? Okay, Yashav. Stay, my daughter, until when until which you know how the thing will fall if it will not be uh, the man will not be quiet, for if it finishes the thing today. Okay, that's a little weird to translate, but how is it translated in the ESV? I wonder. Let me just look at. Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today. Yeah, so let's take a look at that again. We'll finish the word today. Yeah, sounds about right. Um, Shvi, of course, Yashav. Imperative, feminine singular. Ted'in is from Yada. It is the imperfect second feminine singular. Yipol is from Nafal. It is the Kal imperfect, third masculine singular. Yishkot is from Shakat. It is the Kal imperfect, third masculine singular. Kila is from Kala. It is the Kal. No, that's not Kal. That is the PL perfect, third masculine singular. Interesting. So you got a PL perfect form of Kila there. Okay, so we've covered 3 chapters of Ruth. We'll do Ruth 4 next. So, what we have for next time, we will translate the remainder of Genesis 2, starting from verse 18. We will talk about second Vav Yod verbs, and we will translate the last chapter of Ruth. So, hopefully, this has been good uh, translation practice for the rest of you guys as well.
Thank you so much for that, Lewis. Truly appreciate you.
All right. That was my pleasure as well.
Looking forward to the next one. Everybody, thank y'all for watching. We'll see you later. God bless.